You're live on Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Ayanda Ngati. Thanks very much for starting the day with us. Now, as we do at every beginning of the show, of course, we give you an idea of what to expect insofar as the news cycle is concerned. It may be a Friday, it may be Valentine's Day, but it's no different insofar as that is concerned. And to do that, we're joined by our news editor, Zain Semaar. Zain, happy Friday.
Thank you, Ayanda.
Welcome to it. Always great getting your insights. What can we expect on NewzroomAfrika's diary today?
Okay, to start off with, we obviously bring you all the reaction to the President's Sona speech today. We'll be looking at specifically some of the big points that he mentioned in his State of the Nation address, like the Sovereign Fund. We'll also be tracking some of the political leaders, like we expect EFF leader Julius Malema to be addressing an event later this afternoon. We're expecting him also to give more comments about the actual speech before they left the House. Solima Pahila of the SACP is also addressing the Cape Town Press Club.
Right.
And we're hoping that we'll get more response to the President's speech from the alliance partners. Also on our diary today is we're looking forward to a media briefing, the second media briefing by the Chinese ambassador to South Africa, Ling Qiong. Who will be giving us an update basically on how their country or that country is containing or trying to contain the virus, but also the kind of relations that they are having and working relations that they're having with the South African government in terms of containing this virus. As you'll know, there's a plan about quarantining people coming from China at a place, at a hospital in the Free State. So we're definitely tracking that. Also, lastly but not least, we continue to bring you the story of the taxi conflict in Mpumalanga. Mwele Masilela will continue to bring us that story after three taxi drivers were allegedly shot by the police yesterday. So we'll bring you some more updates and details on that story.
Absolutely, looking forward to all of those, especially because they're so important and central to our lives. And I guess we'll use that to segue into the newspapers. A 6-year-old, I think, would get this right. I mean, if you had to imagine what the lead on all of the papers is this morning, you'd probably get it right on your first try. It is, of course, the State of the Nation address, which was only delivered only a few hours ago, if we're being honest. No thanks to the EFF, but I guess, these are some of the issues that will flesh out throughout the show today. And I'll start with the Star. They're going with the angle of viewing yesterday's State of the Nation address as being an embarrassment, and that's simply their headline this morning as they reflect on it. And as expected, a lot of attention been given to the moments before we actually heard what the President had to say, which was the back and forth, the series of disruptions, etc., etc. Them essentially reflecting this morning on how political parties were responding to that, and essentially calling for sanctions against the Red Berets. We saw, obviously, Natasha Mazzoni being quite vocal yesterday, multiple times standing up. Emeritus leader of the IFP, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, also weighing in yesterday. But I guess, there's something to be said about the radio silence from the ANC itself, insofar as how things were proceeding, in spite of their members, by and large, in the form of Pravin Gordhan and the President themselves, being in the firing line from the EFF. So they're reflecting on that. But in their business report this morning, what was most striking for me is how they finally get to the issues of the speech itself, just detailing, without really editorializing what he said, detailing in the most plain and simple sense what the President had to say in his actual speech. And I couldn't help but feel that this could have been printed this time last year.
Yes.
It is the exact same issues in the exact same manner. Once you strip all the drama and everything else and you hone in on what the President might have had to say yesterday, I don't know if there's anything particularly different outside of the few kind of additions, So he's unveiled the list of measures that would include prioritizing generation capacity outside of ESCOM, modernizing the country's rail network, prioritizing infrastructure development to kickstart the economy. Literally, we could have copied and pasted this from the last time he spoke. And I'm hoping, of course, these are some of the issues that we're able to understand. And, whether we were realistic in expecting anything fundamentally different that the president would have had to say. So yeah, those certainly some of the stories dominating the Star this morning.
I think some of the important pointers coming out of the president's speech is also about this service agreement with ministers. I think that is a very important point for me coming out, because it goes a long way to holding ministers account. And for me, that was the speech needs to, or the whole event needed to be looked at so many different levels.
Right.
So the first thing was about this spectacle that took place of our elected representatives in Parliament, right? And just the whole process, and how the whole nation was delayed by the shenanigans of politicians, using the occasion for political saber-rattling, for political grandstanding, and eventually we got to the meat. And I think the citizen, or the Sowetan rather, is talking about parties want EFF to be taken to task. We heard the Speaker, Thandi Modise, talking about the measures that Parliament is now going to put into place. The EFF members were going to be reported to the Ethics Committee, but also to have a look at how to tighten up some of the parliamentary procedures, because I think uppermost in ordinary people's mind is like, get on with the business. We understand the theatrics, we understand the politics. There's enough time for politicians to come to us during election periods. We don't need this kind of spectacle. But, like I say, lots of stuff to be looking at, and lots of layers and lenses, different lenses, to look at what happened yesterday.
Absolutely, and that's why all of the newspapers are really able to speak about the same thing in so many different ways this morning, which is what exactly they're doing. The Citizen going with EFF sparks Sona chaos. That's pretty self-explanatory. A State of the Nation address was for the first time suspended last night when President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech was continuously interrupted by the EFF. And that's the other thing I think we shouldn't lose sight of course. Yesterday was, in some instances, unprecedented, because, perhaps it was a strategy for the Speaker to suspend proceedings, allow those tempers to cool, to allow herself to be able to think through what the next step might be. But as you rightly pointed out, ordinary citizens, I imagine, weren't the most impressed, even those who typically affiliate with the EFF. Which is why I find it interesting this morning that the Citizen has decided to have some of those sentiments captured in their article this morning, where they have what we would typically in broadcasting call voice box, right? Just snippets of sentiments from you and anybody else who cares about politics in this country, and just getting a sense of what it is that you're feeling as the experts weigh in. And they've got students, they've got ordinary residents from Soweto, they've got professors sort of speaking about what it is they hope the president was going to be able to address. And it's stuff that we've also been doing right here at Newzroom Africa, honing in some instances on communities' concerns. We went to Tonga, I remember, in Durban, and spoke about the water crisis there and things like that. And again, it is those concerns and those voices that appear to be lost when the back and forth sort of, take over. And so I'm glad, I guess, the Citizen decided to bring those voices back this morning.
Sure. In the Mail and Guardian this morning, on their page 3, they're talking about South Africa's quarantine plan for coronavirus, where apparently a small Free State dorp will be used to have people coming back from China, put them in isolation, where they will be, and this is a measure obviously introduced to try and stem or not have the disease come into South Africa. So, and also it's a big story on the business day this morning, coronavirus in China ballooned by the infections by 15,000 overnight. And we were speaking yesterday about how the amount has just increased. It was almost a big figure to get to when we started reporting about 1,000 deaths. Suddenly, in the space of 2 days, we are up to 1,500 deaths reported. So clearly a sign that whatever the Chinese government is doing might not be enough to have stemmed the original kind of spread of the disease.
Yeah, and this is quickly turning into a political issue, then, as we would have expected. This morning, I had seen reports of how even some of the Chinese citizens have a growing frustration in an unprecedented way towards the government.
Yes.
And, you know, I guess this is going to, even in the aftermath of the virus, going to affect governance issues in China, considering the public perception and approval in the wake of this coronavirus. But we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for helping us make sense of some of those big stories. Zain Semaar is, of course, our news editor right here on Newzroom Africa. So, of course, many of you have been reflecting on the State of the Nation address yesterday, and considering how popular Twitter has become in ways through which we flesh out all these big issues, we decided to reflect on some of those sentiments with you this morning as we reflect on the day gone by. Meze says, or to focus, the State of the Nation that is, or to focus on the strategy. It needs to tell the watching and listening public that the President is in command and that he knows what needs to be done and why. Most vitally, he needs to outline the implementation methodology of all the policies in place. And that, of course, comes from Metse. I wonder if you're satisfied by that. Samkelo says, SONA should have a format. Last year I said, of that I did, I fell short at, and this year I promise to. And I don't know if you got a sense if that's also broadly what happened yesterday. Many people, I think, will have a sentiment that aligns closely to DA interim leader John Steenhuisen, that perhaps the president started doing that but didn't go all the way. Musi Maimane also weighing in. The president is speaking about the reality in our classrooms. He's out of touch. Our children are exposed to violence in classrooms. They're not safe anymore. How many kids have died at schools this year? That is the state of the classroom. It's not a success story. And this, of course, is in reaction to the president, who started by outlining and admitting the many things that we haven't necessarily gotten right. And then on the flip side went on to say, hey, look, we've managed to get this and this right insofar as our schooling system is concerned, which for me at least was a glaring attempt of trying to salvage even the smallest of victories, even if they exist in a huge context of failure.
Yeah.
Because as Musi Maimane outlines, the schooling system isn't necessarily, I think, what one would wear as part of their badge, you know, because so much has gone wrong so far as that is concerned. And honing in on one issue makes it obvious this kind of strategy that you're trying to do. Overcoming my obstacles says, when Julius Malema said we have a murderer here, surely Cyril Ramaphosa thought EFF was going to talk about Marikana. And that's a meme, of course, suggesting that the president might have thought that attack was directed to him. And Madunana says, I don't understand why we're still having a SONA 2020. They should just send us a PDF file of the empty promises. I imagine that's the sentiment many people will want to share, considering just how yesterday panned out. But we'll leave it there. Continue weighing in. Of course, you'll find us at Newzroom 405, #newsfeed, the AM edition.